Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're going to be taking a look at a book that really makes you think about how we look at success, failure, and just plain luck.
Yeah.
You know, you sent in excerpts from Nassim Taleb's Fooled by Randomness, and I gotta say, just skimming through them uh, got me thinking.
It's a really thought-provoking book.
It is.
Yeah, Taleb doesn't hold back.
No, he doesn't.
He uses his experience as a trader to show just how much we mix up randomness for patterns and luck for skill, and not just in like the financial world, but in life in general.
Yeah, well, let's get right into it then with one of his ideas that really kind of jumps out at you, the lucky fool. He's saying that there are people all around us who've gotten where they are just by chance, but they think it's all because they're so brilliant.
Right, and they're just totally clueless about all the stuff happening behind the scenes that they don't even see.
It's like that example he gives of the retired dentist who only checks his stocks once a year.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I'm a genius investor. But if he was looking at it every day or even every month, it wouldn't look nearly as good.
Exactly. It would be
Yeah.
a much more volatile picture.
Yep.
A much less impressive picture.
So the time frame we choose can really change how we see skill versus luck.
Absolutely.
It's like if you saw someone parallel park perfectly one time,
Right.
and you're like, wow, they're an amazing driver.
Oh, yeah.
But you have no idea how many times they've dented their car.
Right. It's
Got
like judging a book by its cover.
Exactly.
You're just seeing a tiny little snapshot.
Yeah, and this brings us to another one of Taleb's big ideas, survivorship bias.
Right.
You know, we're always hearing about successful entrepreneurs and investors, but we never hear about all the ones who tried the same things and completely failed.
Right. It's like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, he uses that analogy of the successful lawyer living on Park Avenue.
Right.
It's easy to think, well, everyone on Park Avenue must be successful. But you're only seeing a very small group of people. It's like judging how healthy a forest is just by looking at the tallest trees. You're ignoring all the ones that are struggling or already dead.
Exactly.
And Caleb's saying that this survivorship bias really messes with our view of the world.
Yeah, it makes us think that success is more common than it really is.
And it makes us underestimate the role of luck.
Right. We forget that luck plays a huge part in success.
Now, this is where it starts to get really interesting because
Yeah.
then he brings in this idea of alternative histories.
Right.
He uses something called a Monte Carlo simulation to explain it.
Yeah.
Have you ever read those choose your own adventure books where your choices lead to different endings?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like that, but on a much bigger scale. Imagine you could create thousands of virtual versions of yourself,
Okay.
each one making slightly different choices.
Right.
The simulation runs all these different lives and shows you how those choices could play out in different situations.
It's interesting.
Some versions of you might end up being wildly successful,
Right.
while others might totally crash and burn,
Yeah.
even though they all started from the same place.
Right.
It helps us see that the life we're living is just one possibility out of many. It's not like it was preordained or anything.
Right.
You know,
It makes you think.
it does. So me sitting here drinking this coffee,
Yeah.
I can just be the lucky version of me in a whole multiverse of other mess.
You could be.
It's a bit scary and humbling at the same time.
It definitely challenges the stories we tell ourselves about why we succeed or fail.
It does.
Yeah.
He has this really intense example about Russian roulette.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine someone offers you $10 million to play one round. If you survive, everyone would say you're a genius risk taker. But really, you just got lucky.
Right. There's no skill involved in Russian roulette.
There isn't.
It's pure chance.
And a lot of other people in those other possible timelines wouldn't have been so lucky.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought.
It is.
It makes you realize how much of life is out of our control.
Yeah. It really makes you question how much we're actually in charge of our own destiny.
Definitely. And that brings us to another big point. How bad we are at understanding probability.
Oh, yeah.
Our brains just aren't wired to think that way, especially when it comes to risk and uncertainty.
So even when we have statistics or data right in front of us,
Yeah.
we tend to go with our gut feelings and take mental shortcuts.
Exactly.
And that's where we get into trouble.
Right, that's where we make mistakes.
Yeah, there were these two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They spent their whole careers figuring out these mental shortcuts, what they called cognitive biases.
Right.
And they showed how these biases can lead us to make really irrational decisions, especially when we're dealing with probability.
Exactly, like with the availability heuristic.
Yeah, where we overestimate how likely something is just because it's easy to remember.
Right. Like if you see a news report about a plane crash,
Oh, yeah.
you might suddenly be terrified of flying, even though it's still statistically one of the safest ways to travel.
Right.
Your brain is latching onto that vivid image of the plane crash and ignoring the statistics.
Yeah. Or what about anchoring,
Oh, yeah, that's a classic one.
where we get stuck on the first piece of information we hear?
Right, even if it's totally irrelevant.
Yeah, like if you're negotiating a salary
Mm-hmm.
and the employer starts with a ridiculously low number,
Right.
even if you know you're worth more, that initial number can still influence you.
Exactly. It sets an anchor in your mind.
It does.
And it can be hard to break free from that anchor.
So these biases are always working in the background,
Yeah, they're always there.
influencing how we see things and what choices we make without us even realizing it.
It's like our brains are playing tricks on us.
They are.
Yeah.
And they're especially active when it comes to money.
Oh, absolutely.
People often make investment decisions based on stories they've heard or recent market trends.
Right.
Instead of thinking about the actual probabilities.
Yeah, they get caught up in the hype
They do.
and ignore the cold, hard facts.
Which leads to, well,
predictable mistakes.
it does.
Yeah.
So if we're so easily fooled by randomness, what can we do about it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
How can we avoid falling into these traps?
Well, Taleb is really skeptical of those financial models that rely only on historical data.
Okay.
He says the past isn't always a good predictor of the future,
Right.
especially in systems that are really random.
So past performance is not always indicative of future results.
Exactly.
We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
But now I'm really starting to understand why it's true.
It's not just a disclaimer. It's a fundamental truth about how the world works.
It is. It's not just a disclaimer.
No.
It's how things actually work.
Yeah.
Taleb also suggests taking a more philosophical approach to dealing with all the uncertainty in life.
Oh, interesting.
He's a big fan of Stoicism.
Stoicism. I've
Yeah.
heard of it, but
I don't know much about it either.
yeah.
But it's this ancient philosophy
Okay.
that basically says, accept the things you can't control and focus on the things you can.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that a lot of what happens in life is just outside of our control and finding peace and strength in that reality.
So instead of stressing about what the stock market is doing every day,
Yeah,
I should focus on building a solid portfolio and managing my own emotions.
exactly.
I can see how that would be helpful.
It's about cultivating inner strength and wisdom
Mm-hmm.
to weather the storms of randomness that life throws our way.
This is already making me see things differently.
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like I've been using this map to navigate life,
Mhm.
but it's missing a whole dimension.
And once you see that missing dimension,
Yeah,
it changes everything.
it does.
And this is just the beginning.
Wow. Yeah.
There's so much more to explore.
Let's keep going then.
Okay. Taleb also, he dives into how this, this whole probability blindness thing, how it plays out in a very specific way.
Okay.
He says, we often mix up the average for the median,
Okay.
and that can be a huge mistake.
Wait, explain that to me like I'm 5.
Okay. So imagine there are 10 people in a room.
Okay.
9 of them have $1 in their pocket,
Mm.
and one person is carrying like $1 million.
Okay.
The average wealth in that room is over $100,000 per person, right?
Because you'd add up all the money and then divide it by 10 people.
Exactly. But the median, the middle value, like if you lined everyone up from richest to poorest,
Yeah.
is still just $1.
Oh, okay.
So if you just walked into that room, the average would make you think everyone's loaded.
Right.
But the median tells the real story.
Right. The median is like, nope, most people here just have $1. So just looking at averages can be super misleading, especially when you're talking about things like investment returns,
Oh, absolutely.
where a few really big wins or losses can totally skew the whole picture.
Right. Like you could have one investment that goes up 1,000%,
Hmm.
and it makes the average look amazing, but then all your other investments are, flat or even losing money.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think you're doing great, but
Right.
not so much.
Exactly.
He uses that example of Jim Rogers.
Oh, yeah, the legendary investor.
Yeah, who famously said he doesn't buy options because 90% of them expire worthless.
Right. He was focused on the average outcome,
Yeah.
but he wasn't thinking about the fact that the few options that do pay off can pay off big time.
Yeah.
It's like focusing on all the lottery tickets that lose and ignoring that tiny chance of winning the jackpot.
Right.
The average outcome might be a loss,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean it's a bad strategy overall.
It doesn't know.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the whole range of possible outcomes, not just the average,
The whole spectrum.
the whole spectrum. Yeah.
Not just the middle.
Okay, so we've talked about how randomness can fool us, how we're bad at understanding probability, and how even experts can get blinded by success.
Right.
But Taleb doesn't just leave us with a sense of like, oh, we're doomed. Does he?
No, not at all.
He gives us some ways to deal with this messy, unpredictable world, all right?
Right, he gives us tools.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things he talks about is this. Instead of trying to predict every possible outcome, which is impossible,
It is.
we should focus on building systems and strategies that can handle unexpected shocks.
Okay.
He compares it to designing a bridge.
Oh, but
You don't just build it for the average wind speed. You
Oh, wow.
build it to withstand the strongest gusts possible.
so you're prepared for the worst case scenario.
Exactly. You got to be over-engineered, over-prepared.
So it's about acknowledging that we don't know everything
Right.
and being prepared for the unexpected. Kind of like having a rainy day fund.
Yeah, like a rainy day fund for your whole life.
Yeah.
Not just your finances.
Not just your finances, for everything.
Exactly.
And here's something I didn't expect. He actually says that embracing randomness within certain limits can be good for you.
That's right.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Okay, so imagine a central bank that's trying to keep the exchange rate for their currency fixed.
Okay.
If they try to eliminate every little fluctuation,
Hmm.
any tiny deviation could cause a panic.
Right.
But if they allow some noise around that fixed rate,
Yeah.
it becomes less of a big deal.
So it's like if you're trying to balance perfectly on a tightrope,
Right.
any little breeze is going to knock you off.
Exactly.
But if you're walking on a wide path, you can handle some bumps along the way.
That's it. A bit of randomness can actually make a system more stable,
Uh-huh.
more resilient.
Okay, so we got to be ready for shocks. We got to be okay with a little bit of randomness, and we got to admit that we can't predict everything.
Right.
That's a lot to process.
It is. It's a big shift in thinking.
It is. But what about experience?
Mm-hmm.
Does Taleb think that's valuable in this unpredictable world?
He does, but there's a catch.
Okay.
He talks about this thing called denigration of history.
Denigration of history.
Yeah, where people, especially in fields like finance,
Okay.
tend to believe that the mistakes of the past won't happen to them.
Oh, I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, it's that this time is different mentality,
This time is different. Yeah.
which can be very dangerous.
Yeah, they get caught up in the hype of a new trend or investment strategy,
Right.
and they forget that history is full of bubbles and crashes.
Exactly. They think they're smarter than everyone who came before them.
Right, and that leads to
Overconfidence.
overconfidence,
It's
yeah,
big time.
which is never good.
Oh.
He compares it to like a kid touching a hot stove.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how many times you tell them not to, they won't really learn until they get burned.
Right. Experience can be the best teacher, but it can also be a painful one.
It can be.
Yeah.
So learning from history is important, but we also have to realize that we often don't truly understand the lessons until we've lived through them ourselves.
That's right. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another one of these fascinating aspects of randomness. The problem of non-stationarity.
Ah, yes, non-stationarity.
Okay, that's a new one.
It's a mouthful.
It is. Break it down for me.
Okay. Imagine you're trying to figure out what kinds of balls are in an urn,
Okay.
but there's a mischievous little kid who keeps secretly adding and removing balls.
So the contents of the urn are constantly changing.
Exactly.
Boy.
So any conclusions you draw about the urn are going to be unreliable.
Because the rules of the game keep changing.
Exactly. And this is true for the real world, too.
Oh.
The underlying conditions, like the rules of the game, markets or technology, even society, they can shift without warning.
So even if I have a ton of data about the past, it might not be relevant for predicting the future because the game itself has changed.
That's a key point, especially in fields like finance,
Right.
where people tend to rely heavily on historical trends.
So data is important,
Yeah.
but we have to be careful about how we interpret it.
Be very careful.
Okay, what about the role of like thinking, intellectualism? Does Taleb think that deep thinking and analysis are helpful or harmful in this world where so much is unpredictable?
He's all for intellectualism, but he makes a distinction between real intellectual rigor and what he calls scientific intellectualism.
Okay, so what's the difference?
True intellectual rigor is about the methods you use, the evidence you consider, and being willing to question your own assumptions.
Okay.
Scientific intellectualism is more about using fancy jargon and complex theories to sound smart, even if the logic is flawed.
So it's like the difference between a scientist who's carefully testing a hypothesis
Right.
and someone who's just throwing around scientific terms to impress people at a party.
Exactly. Taleb even talks about how Monte Carlo generators can be used to create texts that are grammatically correct but completely meaningless. They mimic the style of certain postmodernist thinkers.
So even ideas that sound really complex can be total nonsense.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to be critical of everything we read and hear.
Don't just take things at face value.
No, look beyond the surface and see if the logic actually holds up.
He tells this funny story about going to a weekly discussion meeting at an investment house.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
He calls it pure intellectual pollution.
Right, where everyone's just eager to show off their ideas.
Without actually doing their homework.
Exactly, it's all style and no substance.
He contrasts that with his friend, a real scientist,
Right.
who spends hours and hours researching a topic before he even forms an opinion.
That's the difference between true intellectual curiosity and just wanting to sound smart.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's not just about being smart. It's about being intellectually honest and recognizing that we don't know everything.
Humility is key.
Humility is key, yeah.
Being willing to admit when you're wrong.
And this ties back to the idea that we often overestimate how much skill contributes to success.
Right, we give too much credit to skill and not enough to luck.
He uses that analogy of monkeys randomly typing on typewriters.
Oh, yeah, the infinite monkey theorem.
Yeah, if you give them enough time,
Yeah.
one of them is bound to write something recognizable, like the Iliad.
Right, but that doesn't mean the monkey's a brilliant writer.
No.
It's just random chance.
Pure luck.
Exactly.
And Taleb says this same principle applies to a lot of fields.
Especially those with a high degree of randomness.
Like investing.
Exactly.
Just because someone's made a lot of money
Right.
doesn't mean they're a genius investor.
They might just be the lucky monkey who happened to type out the Iliad.
They might.
Yeah, we see the success, but we don't see all the failures.
All monkeys who didn't write the Iliad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where survivorship bias comes in again.
Yeah.
We tend to only see the winners.
The successful investors, the entrepreneurs who made it big.
Right, while all the others who tried and failed are invisible.
It's like that analogy of the lawyer on Park Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
We see their success
Right.
and think, well, anyone can achieve that if they work hard enough.
Right. But we're not seeing all the people who worked just as hard and didn't make it.
We're only seeing a very selective sample.
Exactly, the survivors.
Right, not all the ones who didn't survive.
And that can lead to some really unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, and a false sense of control.
Absolutely. We start to think we have more control over our lives than we actually do.
So we got to be aware of this survivorship bias.
Yes, awareness is key.
And adjust our thinking accordingly.
Be realistic.
Be realistic. Yeah.
Don't let the success stories fool you.
Okay, so how does this play out in the real world?
Well, think about the whole idea of chasing past performance.
Okay.
Investors often flock to funds or managers who've done really well recently.
Mm-hmm.
They assume that past success means they'll keep winning in the future.
Right, like, oh, this manager's been on fire. I got to get in on that.
Exactly, but past performance, especially in fields like investing, is
Yeah.
often a terrible predictor of future results.
So it's like assuming that a basketball player who had a hot streak last season is guaranteed to be just as good this season.
Exactly, they might just be riding a wave of good luck,
Right.
which could end at any time.
So we shouldn't just blindly follow the crowd.
No, think for yourself.
Do our own research.
Exactly.
And remember that luck might be playing a bigger role than we think.
Luck is a huge factor. We can't ignore it.
We can't.
No.
So we got to be skeptical of those claims based solely on past performance and look deeper to see what's really driving those results.
Look for the fundamental.
The fundamentals, yeah.
The underlying factors that are truly driving success.
Okay, so be wary of survivorship bias and don't be fooled by past performance. What else does Taleb say about how randomness can trip us up?
He dives into some really interesting examples of how randomness can actually disguise itself as non-randomness.
Okay.
Like back in the early 1900s, there was this professor, Carl Pearson, who analyzed Monte Carlo roulette wheels.
Roulette wheels.
Okay. Even though they were designed to be random,
Right.
Pearson found statistically significant deviations from what you'd expect from a truly random distribution.
So even something that's supposed to be random can have these weird patterns.
Exactly. Our intuition about randomness is often off.
It is.
We expect random events to look a certain way, even when they don't.
Right.
And this leads us to see patterns where none exist.
Oh, okay.
And to think that random fluctuations mean something when they really don't.
So if even a roulette wheel can fool us,
Yeah.
imagine how much more susceptible we are to seeing patterns in the stock market
Oh, absolutely.
or in life, where
Right.
things are way more complicated.
Where the underlying mechanisms are much harder to understand.
Right. Taleb says a lot of those market movements that people attribute to specific causes are actually just random noise.
Just noise.
So we need to be more skeptical of explanations for why markets move the way they do.
Especially those explanations based on complex theories
Right.
or stories.
Right. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the most likely one.
Often, the simplest explanation is that it was just random.
It was just random. Yeah.
Just chance.
Just chance. Okay.
Yeah.
So recognizing that randomness can look like order is important.
It's crucial.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about how our brains work?
Mm-hmm.
Does Taleb have anything to say about how we process all this uncertainty?
He does. He points out that our brains are kind of wired to think in a linear way.
Linear. Okay.
We assume that a steady input will create a proportionate output.
Okay.
But in the real world, especially in complex systems,
Yeah.
the relationship between cause and effect is often nonlinear.
Give me an example. Help me wrap my head around this.
Okay, think about practicing the piano. You might spend months practicing every day and see very little progress. And then suddenly, boom, you have a breakthrough.
Right. It's not always a steady upward climb.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or think about a wildfire.
Oh.
A single spark can smolder for days before suddenly erupting into this huge inferno.
Right. So small changes can have big effects.
Exactly.
And even tiny events can trigger these huge chain reactions.
Cascading consequences.
Cascading consequences, yeah.
And this applies to financial markets, too.
Okay.
A lot of those financial models don't account for this nonlinearity.
Right.
They assume that risk and reward are always proportional,
Right.
which can create this false sense of security.
Yeah, like if I invest twice as much money, I should get twice the return.
Right. But that's not how it works in reality.
Well,
Sometimes a small change in the market can wipe out your entire investment.
oh yeah,
And sometimes a risky bet can lead to a huge windfall.
it can. So we got to be aware that the future might not look anything like the past.
Especially when we're dealing with these nonlinear systems.
So nonlinear systems, right?
Yeah.
And this brings us back to that problem of not really understanding probability.
Right. Our brains just aren't good at it.
We like things to be certain.
We do.
Black and white.
We crave certainty.
We crave it. Yeah.
But the real world is full of gray areas.
Full of gray areas.
We struggle with uncertainty. It's hard for us to hold multiple possibilities in our minds at the same time.
Yeah. He uses that example of imagining a vacation.
Oh, yeah, the Paris or the Bahamas.
Yeah, where you have a 50% chance of going to Paris and a 50% chance of going to the Bahamas.
Right, it's a coin toss.
Right, but what's the point of that?
Well, he's showing how our brains struggle to hold both possibilities at once.
Okay.
We tend to picture ourselves in one place or the other instead of as this probabilistic blend of both.
So instead of seeing it as a coin toss,
Right.
where either outcome is equally likely,
Yeah.
we start picturing ourselves sipping wine under the Eiffel Tower.
Or lounging on a beach in the Bahamas.
And we convince ourselves that one of those is definitely going to happen.
Exactly. And that's how our intuition about probability goes wrong.
So if I just saw a news report about a terrorist attack in Paris, I might think, oh no, I'm definitely going to the Bahamas,
Right.
even though the odds haven't actually changed.
Exactly. Our brains latch onto these vivid images and stories,
Right.
and they ignore the statistics.
The cold hard number.
The cold, hard numbers.
Our brains are storytellers, not statisticians.
That's a great way to put it.
So if our brains are so bad at dealing with probability and randomness,
Yeah.
are we just doomed to be fooled by them forever?
That's where the work of Kahneman and Tversky comes in.
Oh, wait.
They challenge the old way of thinking about economics, that humans are these rational actors who make decisions based on logic and probability.
Right.
They showed that we're not always rational.
We're not.
No. And that our decisions are often influenced by these cognitive biases.
These mental shortcuts.
Exactly.
So it's not about becoming these perfectly rational robots.
Yeah.
It's about understanding our own mental quirks
Right.
and finding ways to work around them.
Developing strategies to overcome those biases.
So it's like having a user manual for your own brain,
That's a great analogy.
but with a warning label that says, this is a work in progress.
Exactly. We're always learning.
We are.
Always evolving.
So how do we use this user manual?
Well, Taleb says the first step is to admit that we don't know everything.
Okay.
We got to be humble.
Humble, yeah.
about what we know and what we don't know,
Mm.
and skeptical of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
So don't believe those gurus who promise you guaranteed returns or easy solutions.
Exactly. There's no such thing as a sure thing.
There isn't, especially not in this crazy world.
Right. The world is full of surprises.
It is.
And instead of trying to predict every possible outcome,
Which is impossible.
which is impossible, yeah.
We should focus on what we can control
Right.
and build strategies that can handle whatever comes our way.
That's the key. Robustness.
Robust.
Building systems that can withstand shocks.
He talks about a barbell approach to risk management.
Oh, yeah, the barbell strategy.
What's that all about?
Okay, imagine a barbell with weights on either end.
Okay.
You put most of your resources into safe, low-risk investments.
That's one end of the barbell.
Exactly. That's the safe weight.
Okay.
And then a small portion goes into high-risk, high-reward bets.
That's the other end of the barbell.
Right. That's the risky weight.
Okay, so you're balancing security and opportunity.
Exactly. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
So if one side of the barbell goes down, you've still got the other side to keep you balanced.
Right. You're protected from catastrophic losses.
And you have the potential for big wins if those risky bets pay off.
That's the idea. Balance and diversification.
Balance and diversification. Look,
Okay.
what else?
Emotional resilience is crucial.
Emotional resilience.
Yeah, being able to accept losses,
Yeah.
learn from them,
Yeah.
and adjust your strategies.
So don't get too attached to your beliefs or your investments.
Right. Be willing to change your mind when the evidence changes.
Be flexible. Be open to learning. And don't let your ego get in the way.
That's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
When your ego gets involved, that's when you make the big mistakes.
Right. So stay humble, stay flexible, and keep learning.
That's the path to wisdom.
And don't underestimate the power of diversification.
Ah, yes.
Diversification.
We've talked about it with the barbell approach, but you're saying it applies to more than just investments.
Absolutely. Diversify everything.
Everything, okay.
Your income streams, your skill set, your relationships.
Yeah, put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because any single basket could get dropped.
This is starting to feel really empowering.
It is empowering.
I was like, instead of trying to control the external world,
Which is impossible.
which is impossible, yeah.
We can focus on building our own internal strength and flexibility so we can handle whatever life throws at us.
That's a great way to put it. Taleb also advocates for a contrarian approach.
Contrarian. What does that mean?
Be skeptical of conventional wisdom.
Okay.
Look for the hidden opportunities that everyone else is missing.
So think for yourself. Don't just follow the crowd.
Exactly. The crowd is often wrong.
The crowd is often wrong, yeah.
Look for the things that other people are ignoring.
The undervalued assets, the hidden gems.
Right. The places where you can find real value.
And this brings us to the concept of optionality.
Oh, yes. Optionality.
Creating situations where you have lots of choices,
Multiple paths.
multiple paths, so you can adapt to changing circumstances
Mhm.
and take advantage of unexpected opportunities.
Exactly. It's like having a backup plan.
Or multiple backup plans.
Or multiple backup plans, yeah.
So you're never stuck.
Never stuck. Always have options.
Options are good.
Options are good, yeah.
And never stop learning from your mistakes.
That's crucial.
Be willing to admit when you're wrong.
Yeah. Analyze what went wrong.
And then change your approach.
Adapt and evolve.
So embrace failure as a learning opportunity.
Exactly. Failure is not the end.
It's not.
It's just a stepping stone.
A stepping stone.
Yeah.
Okay? And have a long-term perspective.
Right. Don't get caught up in the short-term fluctuation.
Don't panic over every little dip in the market or setback in your career.
Exactly. Keep your eye on the prize.
Remember that Rome wasn't built in a day.
That's the spirit. Be patient. Be persistent.
And recognize that success is usually a series of small wins and losses.
Not one big grand gesture.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
This is a lot to take in, but it's really valuable.
It is. It's a whole new way of thinking about the world.
It's like getting a crash course in how to thrive in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
And Taleb goes even deeper.
He does.
He offers specific advice for traders and investors,
Okay.
but the underlying principles apply to life in general.
So what's his wisdom for those navigating the wild world of finance?
He stresses the importance of protecting your downside.
Protecting your downside.
Yeah, minimizing your losses
Well,
rather than maximizing your gains.
so it's about survival first,
Survival first, then growth.
then growth. Okay.
He also advocates for a value investing approach.
Value investing. What's that?
It's about finding those undervalued assets
Yeah.
that have a high margin of safety.
So you're looking for those hidden gems,
Exactly, the diamonds in the rough.
the ones that have the potential to grow over the long term.
Right, not the flashy, trendy investments that everyone's chasing.
Don't chase the hype?
No, the hype is often misleading.
Okay, what else?
Understanding market psychology is crucial.
Market psychology.
Yeah, how people think and behave in the market.
Okay.
Be aware of the herd mentality.
A herd mentality.
That often drives bubbles and crashes.
So everyone's rushing in one direction.
Right, and then suddenly they all rush out.
And that's when you get those big swings in the market.
Exactly, the crowd is not always right.
The crowd is not always right, so think for yourself.
Do your own research.
Don't be afraid to go against the grain.
Sometimes the best opportunities are the ones that everyone else is overlooking.
Okay, makes sense. Anything else?
Always have a solid risk management plan.
Risk management, okay.
One that accounts for those black swan events.
The unexpected things that can totally throw you off course.
Exactly, the things you can't predict.
So don't just hope for the best.
No, plan for the worst.
Plan for the worst, okay.
Have a safety net, diversify your portfolio, and be ready to adapt.
Be adaptable, be flexible.
That's the key to surviving in a world of randomness.
This has been an incredible journey through the world of randomness.
It's been a fascinating exploration.
It has. Taleb's insights are both challenging and liberating.
They are.
They make us confront the limits of our knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
but they also show us a way to live a wiser, more resilient life.
A more fulfilling life.
A more fulfilling life, yeah. Wow, this deep dive has really been something else.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
It is.
A lot to think about.
I feel like I've gotten this whole new way of looking at the world,
I know what you mean.
one that takes into account how much skill and luck and randomness are always playing out.
Yeah, it's like a constant dance
You get to-
between those three things.
And it's kind of scary how easily we can be fooled by randomness,
It is.
even when we think we're being all logical and stuff.
It's humbling, right,
It is.
to realize how much we don't know.
Yeah. And Taleb doesn't let us forget it.
No, he doesn't.
He ends the book with this question that really sticks with you.
What is it? Remind me.
He asks, if we're so prone to being fooled by randomness, how can we design systems that are more resilient to those unpredictable events?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is.
He's talking about everything, like financial systems,
Yeah.
political systems.
Even our own personal systems for
Right, how we make decisions,
Yeah.
how we navigate life.
It's like he's saying, okay, I've shown you how the world really works. Now what are you going to do about it?
It's a challenge.
It is a big one.
But it's also an exciting challenge.
It is.
Yeah, it's like once you see the problem,
Yeah.
you can start looking for solutions.
Right. And the first step is awareness, like we've been talking
The
about.
awareness is key.
Once we realize how bad we are at understanding probability and how much we love to see patterns, even when they're not there,
Yeah,
we can start to make better decisions.
more robust decisions.
More robust decisions. Yeah.
That can handle the unexpected.
So it's not about getting rid of randomness.
No, that's impossible.
It's impossible, yeah.
Randomness is always going to be there.
It's more about learning how to live with it.
Right, how to roll with the punches.
Yeah. How to anticipate the unexpected and build systems that can handle those curveballs.
I like that. Build systems that can handle the curveballs.
Yeah. And Taleb gives us a lot of practical advice for doing just that.
He does.
From diversifying our investments
Mm-hmm.
to embracing that stoic outlook.
Right, accepting what we can't control.
Yeah. Focusing on what we can.
Finding peace in the midst of chaos.
For me, the biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive
Yeah.
is that idea of alternative histories.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful concept.
It really is.
It makes you think.
It does. It makes you realize that the life we're living is just one possibility out of many.
Right, there are so many other paths we could have taken.
And it makes you question the stories we tell ourselves about success and failure.
Exactly.
Like maybe those successful people we admire,
Mm-hmm.
they just got lucky.
Right, they were in the right place at the right time.
And maybe those who haven't achieved the same level of success,
Yeah.
they're just as talented and hardworking.
It's just that the dice rolled differently for them.
Exactly. It's a lot more about chance than we like to admit.
And that's okay.
It is okay.
It's liberating in a way to
Yeah.
realize that we're not always in control.
Yeah, and it encourages us to be more compassionate,
Yes,
both to ourselves and to others,
absolutely.
because we're all just doing the best we can with the hand we've been dealt.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
This deep dive has been amazing.
It has.
Taleb's insights are both challenging and inspiring.
They are. They make you think differently.
They do. They force you to confront your own biases and assumptions.
Yeah, and to embrace the uncertainty of life.
But in a way, that's also what makes life so exciting, right?
It is. It's the unknown that keeps us going.
The mystery, the adventure.
The possibility.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, keep questioning, keep learning.
Be skeptical of anyone who claims to have all the answer.
No easy answers.
And embrace the beauty and the challenge of living in a world that's full of surprises.
That's the best way to live.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds open and keep exploring.